My name is Tracy Williams, and I'm the Council's Archivist and Local Studies Librarian based at the Core Library in Solihull. Despite not being originally from Solihull myself, I have picked up a bit of the borough's history during more than 20 years of working with the archives, and I couldn't be more attached to the place if my ancestors had been here for generations. So for the borough's anniversaries in 2024, I just wanted to share what I think are some of the key themes in the borough's history. In 1954, Solihull was granted a Royal Charter of Incorporation as a municipal borough. In 1964, with its population having increased massively, it had County Borough status conferred on it, meaning that it was a unitary authority separate from Warwickshire County Council and with the same legal status as cities such as Birmingham and Coventry. With the reorganisation of local government in 1974, it became a metropolitan district and had a second Royal Charter of Incorporation as a borough granted in 1973 to come into effect for the new Metropolitan Borough on the 1st of April 1974. I'm obviously not going to have time to cover all the events from the last 50, 60 and 70 years across the whole of the borough, but these are what I think are the key themes, with a bit of background for context. For much of its history, Solihull was a quiet rural village in the county of Warwickshire. It was surrounded by swathes of countryside, with farms in every direction. When local government below county level was first reorganised under the Local Government Act 1894, Solihull became a rural district. The image shows the outline of the present Metropolitan Borough with a map of the Solihull Rural District as it was between 1894 and 1932. You can also see the significant increase in population, a 45% increase in the 10 years between the 1921 and 1931 censuses. For comparison, the population of Warwickshire as a whole grew by 10% during the same period. The national rate was 5.5%. For Solihull, 37% of its population increase was put down to inward migration, most of which was from Birmingham. The village, as everyone called the centre of Solihull, and some still do now, was basically semi-rustic cottages, with family-run shops and businesses centred on 4 roads: High Street, Warwick Road, Mill Lane and Drury Lane. It's Drury Lane pictured on this photo. The inhabitants of those roads were called the villagers. Edgar Shepherd, the headmaster of Sharman's Cross Junior School in the 1950s, looked back on the Solihull of 1909 and said that it was a quiet place where you might find a pig asleep in the middle of the high street or hens running about. In 1932, a reorganisation of local government saw Solihull become an urban district based on expectations of its increasing population. I think a graphic illustration of that change is this photo of workers taking up the cobbles in the High Street in about 1933. Just over 30 years later, in terms of local government, Solihull had the same status as cities such as Birmingham and Coventry. That level and speed of growth is unique, and Solihull is the only former rural district to have become a metropolitan borough in its own right. Becoming an urban district saw Solihull lose some of its southwest rural fringe. Despite the smaller geographical area, the population continued to grow. The population had more than doubled in 7 years, from just over 25,000 in 1932 to over 52,000 by 1939, putting pressure on services, especially housing. The Vice-Chairman of Solihull Urban District Council, Mr. Richard Turner, said in 1937 that the council had difficulty because of the popularity of Solihull with Birmingham people, who wanted the rural character of Solihull to be maintained, while still expecting all of the civic amenities to which they had become accustomed in Birmingham. The 1951 census showed that Solihull's population was almost 68,000, making it the largest district in Warwickshire. Town Clerk Maurice Mell pointed out the incongruity of Solihull's population being larger than the combined population of Warwick, Leamington and Stratford, despite each of those three authorities being a chartered borough with a mayor and a corporation. By 1937, the council had departments scattered across the town, so they brought everything together on one site, the former public hall in Poplar Road, still there, most recently as Yates's. It was opened in 1937 by Sir John Mellor, pictured here at the door. He was the MP for Tamworth, in which constituency Solihull was at the time. He said that the growth of Solihull had been phenomenal, and he could see a time when Solihull would become a borough. In 1938, a special committee appointed by Solihull Urban District Council recommended that the council should discuss making a petition for incorporation as a borough. However, these preliminary steps were shelved when war broke out in 1939. Although suffering only a few bombing raids compared with Birmingham, Solihull Urban District did sustain some bomb damage, and dozens of people were killed in air raids. There seem to have been 4 main air raids in the Solihull Urban District, 2 in November 1940, 1 in December 1940, and this one about 6 o'clock in the morning on the 21st of July 1942. A bomb was dropped near Solihull Gasworks and bounced over trees and a field into Cornix Lane, killing 10 people in Cornix Lane and Alston Road, including all 6 members of the Pinder family. The Birmingham Daily Gazette of the 2nd of October 1944 indicated that 41 people were killed in Solihull during the war, and there were 49 air raids, 492 high-explosive bombs dropped, 78 people admitted to hospital with injuries, 49 houses totally destroyed, and 3,850 houses damaged. In a way, it seems astonishing that whilst the war was going on, people were also thinking of a post-war future and looking towards education, recreation and entertainment. In another way, you can understand that people were in need of hope and thinking of a better future. The council bought up land for parks, purchasing Elmdon Hall estate in 1944. Bruton Park was also given to Solihull by Horace Bruton in the same year. Solihull Society of Arts was also established in 1944, and a campaign began to save the Manor House in Solihull High Street, which was up for sale and at risk of demolition. The Manor House in Solihull High Street was never a manor house in terms of being home to the lords of the manor. It was built by the Greswold family in the late 15th century and was a private house until 1910. It then became a doctor's surgery until it was sold in 1936, but the outbreak of World War II halted plans to turn it into a pub. During the war, the Home Guard used it as their local headquarters. In 1944, Ansells announced their intention to sell the building at auction. Its future was in doubt, but a fundraising campaign towards the end of the war raised the £12,000 required for a charitable trust to buy the building and carry out essential repairs. A key person in the purchase was Miss Flora Forster, who was headmistress of Solihull High School for Girls at Morven Hall. She lived in a flat next door to the manor house, and in October 1944 she arranged for the girls from the school to carry out what was called the Grand Cleaning. Housing was a significant problem after the war. Most people on Birmingham's waiting list for a council house had almost no hope of being allocated a property. It was possible to build privately if you had the money to do so, but you would also need a building licence, land, planning permission and materials, none of which was easy to obtain. Many construction workers had been casualties of the war, so there was also a labour shortage. A further restriction was that for every private dwelling built, 4 social housing dwellings had to be built. In 1949, George Lavender, an ex-serviceman employed at the Post Office Factory, Birmingham, realised that it wasn't only local councils who could build social housing. People could group together and form a housing association. This meant that they could not own the houses that they had built, but would rent them from the association. Solihull, being in close proximity to Birmingham, having a supply of land available, and with a council that actively wanted to encourage self-help housing associations, was home to more than 35 of these self-build housing associations. Martin Lindsay, the MP for Solihull at the time, told Parliament in 1952 that there were more self-help housing groups in Solihull than in any other constituency. Most of the men who built the houses would have been working a 48-hour week in their day job and then at least another 20 hours a week for 2 or 3 years on building houses that they would rent, not own. Mrs. Doreen Street at number 23 and Mrs. Barbara Hiscox at number 21 are pictured here in 1952-53, standing in the doorways of their part-built houses in Dovedale Avenue, which were part of a self-build project by Solihull Progressive Housing Association. Nearly 700 homes in Solihull in 1950 lacked a sewerage connection. Planners were asked to design an ideal neighbourhood from scratch, with private and municipal homes. A 100-acre farmland site between Coventry Road, Hobbsmoat Road and Linden Road was selected for what was described as a town within a town. Solihull's post-war planning approach was based on the theory of the neighbourhood unit of self-contained centres. Hobbsmoat was the first estate in Solihull to be developed in this way, and the intention was that people didn't need to go beyond the confines of their small unit to get their requirements for daily life. Hobbsmoat Library, pictured here in 1957 when it opened, was the second purpose-built library in Solihull. Shirley was the first, and it was the first to be built since Solihull took over from Warwickshire the responsibility for libraries in the district in 1947. The coronation of Queen Elizabeth II saw huge celebrations across the district, and this photo shows the Knoll coronation pageant. In August 1953, Solihull Council was advised that it would be granted a royal charter for incorporation as a borough, the first of the new Queen's reign. The news was made public in January 1954, and it was announced that Princess Margaret would visit Solihull to present the charter on behalf of the Queen, who was on a 6-month tour of the Commonwealth. Princess Margaret visited Solihull on the 11th of March 1954 to present the charter. This was known locally as Charter Day. You can see from the photo of Poplar Road here the crowds that came out to witness Princess Margaret's visit to the Council House, where she inspected the Civic plate. The actual presentation took place at the Odeon Cinema, Shirley, which was the only venue in the new borough large enough to accommodate the 1,200 invited guests. It was a hugely significant day in Solihull's history, and a group of local amateur filmmakers filmed the occasion with the explicit intention of presenting the resulting film to the council for the borough's archives. Other notable events happened in the same year that Solihull finally became a borough, including the purchase by the council of the open-air swimming pool in Malvern Park, known as Solihull Lido. It was the first municipal swimming pool in the Solihull district. It was reported that 100 bathers used the pool during its opening weekend. Many Silhillians have fond memories of Solihull Lido, but the dependency on good weather, the lack of heating, and competition from indoor pools that subsequently opened meant that as a result of increasing financial losses and structural problems requiring expensive repairs, the pool was closed in 1982. Although the elevation to a municipal borough was important in Solihull's journey to become a county borough, it did not bestow any new powers on Solihull, apart from the new borough having a mayor instead of the previous chairman of Solihull Urban District. Councillor Robert Douglas Cooper, seen here in a painting from the Civic Suite, was Solihull's last chairman and its first mayor. The borough charter came into effect at 12 noon on the 24th of May 1954. The mayor said that Solihull had started its new life in a blaze of glory, and the projects before the council were simply enormous: central redevelopment, the civic centre scheme, and the development at Hobbsmoat. It was realised that the Sol 1 registration was due to come up for first registration at Birmingham City Council in 1955, so when Solihull knew that it was to be a borough, Solihull Council thought it would be ideal for the mayoral vehicle, and Birmingham agreed to reserve it for us. The vehicle pictured is the hybrid mayoral Range Rover, which was received in November 2021. On the 25th of May 1962, Solihull received its first official visit from a reigning monarch. The Queen came to open Solihull Civic Hall, which was on the site of Touchwood, overlooking what's now Golden Jubilee Gardens. And the fact that the Charter Day ceremony had to take place in a cinema had focused people's minds on the need for a venue capable of hosting larger events, and so the Civic Hall was developed. The Queen said at the opening, "The history of Solihull is a story of steady progress from the earliest times, the pace of which has increased to a gallop in this century." The redevelopment of Solihull town centre in the early 1960s saw the most dramatic change to the historic heart of the old town. This photo shows the view from Warwick Road down Mill Lane. For reference, House of Fraser is now on the left, Loaf is on the right. Plans were mooted as early as 1956, when representatives from Solihull Council visited Wilmslow, a market town in Cheshire that had parallels with Solihull in terms of rapid growth as a dormitory town for a nearby city. Mell Square was developed by Norwich Union, the same as Wilmslow. A public inquiry was held in October 1960, but it wasn't until June 1963 that approval was finally given, and work started in 1964. The first shops opened in the summer of 1966. The plan was linked to the growth of Solihull, which would need more shops and more car parking, neither of which was possible with the existing narrow streets and cottages. The council also wanted to provide a service road at the rear of high street shops, leaving the high street for shoppers. Meanwhile, Solihull's population continued to grow, standing at almost 96,000 by 1961, so almost at the 100,000 needed to be a county borough. The Local Government Commission confirmed in 1961 that the recommendation would be for Solihull to have county borough status conferred on it, and this happened with effect from the 1st of April 1964. The change in status to a county borough in 1964 was momentous for Solihull, as this is when it became independent from Warwickshire County Council and responsible for all its own services. However, it did have to have a change to its boundaries, as it was government policy that as far as possible Greenbelt remained with county councils. By 1971, the population of Solihull County Borough was 107,093. There was no huge public celebration for Elevation Day, the 1st of April 1964. There was a civic service at St Alfred's Church and an official luncheon at the Civic Hall. The bell ringers at St Alfred's Church rang a quarter peal of Grand Triples to mark the occasion. On Elevation Day +1, the Mayor laid the foundation stone for Tudor Grange swimming baths, and there was a farewell civic dinner in the evening to say goodbye to Warwickshire. The farewell was only to the administration by Warwickshire. Solihull was still part of the county itself until local government reorganisation 10 years later. The most tangible reminder of Elevation Day today is the clock in Bruton Gardens, which was paid for by public subscription. The target of £1,400 for a public clock to mark Solihull's new county borough status was finally reached with the presentation on the 31st of March 1964 of 2 canvas bags of silver coins, which were the proceeds of a teenage dance at the Civic Hall. The clock itself was set in motion on the 5th of May 1964. The driving force behind the success of Solihull in achieving county borough status was acknowledged to be the town clerk, William Morris Mell. He had been the town clerk, forerunner of the chief executive, since 1946, and had steered Solihull through a period of incredibly rapid growth. He clearly intended to remain as Solihull's town clerk until his expected retirement in 1973, but he died suddenly on the 19th of January 1965, aged 56, less than a year after the County Borough celebrations and whilst extensive work was underway on the redevelopment of Solihull Town Centre. 8 weeks after his death, the council, recognising that he did not like traditional memorials such as obelisks or clock towers, decided that it would be a fitting tribute to name the new main square after him. The suggested name was Maurice Mell Place, but by the time the shops opened in 1966, it was Mell Square, the name we still have today. Solihull has actually twice been granted a Royal Charter of Incorporation as a borough, firstly in 1954, which made us a municipal borough, and secondly in 1973, to take effect when we became a Metropolitan Borough on the 1st of April 1974, which is what we have been for the last 50 years. Without this second Royal Charter, the borough would have been abolished as the result of the Local Government Act 1972. All boroughs, including Solihull, would then have had the status of metropolitan districts and would not have been entitled to have a mayor. With effect from the 1st of April 1974, the existing County Borough of Solihull merged with 10 civil parishes from the former Meriden Rural District: Borsall, Barston, Berkswell, Bickenhill, Castle Bromwich, Chelmsley Wood, Ford Bridge, Hampton in Arden, Kingshurst and Meriden, as well as the parish of Hockley Heath that had been in Stratford upon Avon Rural District since it was removed from Solihull in 1964, and this created the borough as we know it today. The new district actually shouldn't have been called Solihull because the Meriden parishes didn't agree to the name. Instead, they selected Hemlingford as their preferred name. The government had to arbitrate and decided on Solihull, going against its own guidance that a new authority should have a new name rather than retain the name of one of its constituent parts. The history of a place isn't just about changes in the landscape and the built environment, it's also about communities and the people who live, work or study in those areas. The Solihull Borough is really made up of a collection of villages, each with their own histories, traditions and stories. History is nothing if not a jigsaw puzzle. We all have a piece or two. But the big picture can only be seen if we all share the pieces we have. My role as the Council's archivist and local studies librarian is to do my best to make sure that we collect as many of those pieces as possible so that people in the future will have the fullest picture we can give them. As events pass from memory into history, the interpretation by those future historians may differ from ours, as they will see the world through a different prism from us. Although the facts are the facts, interpretation of why and how things happened can change over time. For me, that key in understanding and learning from history is knowing the context from the time and trying to understand what things were like and what influenced people's decisions. As a way of sharing pieces of the jigsaw that we have, we're using the internet to tell some of the local history stories that we come across, especially those that aren't recorded elsewhere. Do have a look at our Solihull Life blog, and if there is anything you would like to contribute, please add a comment or consider writing up something for the blog as a guest author. There is a post on there with details of everything we know about Charter Day, with more photos than I've had time for here, plus a link to the Charter Day film. Please do get in touch with any queries about local history that you may have, and we'll do our best to help. Email is easiest, as we can't always guarantee that specialist staff will be around if you drop into the library without an appointment. If you do visit the core, remember to have a look at the Heritage Gallery on the first floor of the building, where there is usually an exhibition about Solihull's history. I like to think that those Silhillians of the past, although they may not recognise much of the landscape of Solihull of today, I hope they'd recognise our values and our civic pride, and understand that we still feel that Solihull is a special place. Thank you very much.